I'm about to ride. It's the KLH show, starring me, KLH. I'm telling you, you better hold on to something. Let's go!
What's going on, Waterberries? Me, your man KLH, back in your TV screen, here to save the world 30 minutes at a time. Hope all is well with you folks out there. And as always, I know you have a whole lot of viewing choices out there, especially with cable and dish. Is crazy, man. And you made this choice. And if you're watching on YouTube, I appreciate you too, because you have a gazillion choices there. I appreciate you for that choice. And as always, please tell somebody to tell somebody. And I'm working on making this thing as good as I can to bring you the brilliant mind of KLH. I'm not brilliant. Maybe I'm kind of brilliant. Anyways, I want to go through a couple of things. I know I'm clapping a lot. It's a little crazy right now. I want to go through a few things and just, kick around a couple of ideas, a couple of thoughts, let folks know where I'm at on a couple of ideas. Now, I am a registered Democrat, but ironically, I relate to a lot of things that conservatives believe in. I think that on the more progressive liberal side of things, the Democratic part of me, that the government can do a lot of good for us. In fact, I think that the government should do a lot of good for us. Personally, I think that things that they can and should do for us are things like health care. I know the conservatives hate that idea, but I think that the government should go further and run health care entirely. I also think that the government should protect the country from attacks, from terrorism. And I think under President Obama, he's been doing a great job. And frankly, President Bush has been doing a great job. I think that, we got a sneak attack, and unfortunately those kinds of things happen. But I think that's something that government can do and should do for its citizens. I also think that taking care of our infrastructure, roads, bridges, and whatnot are very important for the government to do, as is education. The kids coming up should be well educated and equipped to go out into the world and become productive. And when that happens, the whole country benefits from that. So these are things that the government can do, should do. If you go to one side of the political aisle or the other, there's a lot of disagreements as to what the government should do. These lights always bug my eyes, but I'm fighting through it. There's a lot of disagreement as far as what the government should do, but I think the government should do those things. One of the areas where I think the government should not be is interfering with what consenting adults do. There's been some buzz out in California, which is the home of the porno business of all things. Who'd have thought KLH be talking about porn? There's been a lot of buzz about them wanting to start getting involved in putting some restrictions on porn. Some very conservative people might think, yeah, that's a good idea. I think it's a stupid idea. But there is an initiative that's going to be put before the voters of LA, I believe. And the initiative is to get porn actors to wear condoms when they're filming. I personally think this is the stupidest idea, or actually one of many stupid ideas where people from government want to impose their opinions and their viewpoints on others. Now, the premise for this law that they would like enacted is that they are protecting workers in the workplace, which doesn't pass the laugh test. It is so dishonest that they're premising it like this, saying that, well, you know, people are getting exposed to AIDS and whatnot, which is true, but people get exposed to AIDS in their personal lives all the time, and the government is not stepping in demanding that all citizens should have to use condoms. They're only picking on the porno industry. So what they would have to do is have inspectors go on the sets of porno films being made and check to make sure that the men are wearing condoms. How stupid is that? So again, it goes back to these people who are heading up this initiative, wanting to impose their moral viewpoints on other people. Ultimately, what they really want to do is try to get rid of the porno industry. I think that would be a damn shame. Well, that's me. You know, that's the thing. Everybody has a right to their opinion. Everybody has a right to do what they want to do as long as they're not hurting anybody else. And if you are a consenting adult, you know what it is when you decide to get into that business. You know what the risks are. And if you want to do that, you should be free to do it. It's just like a lot of feminists want to say, oh, women are being objectified and this and that. They're being taken advantage of. And what they're really doing is trying to impose their opinions, their viewpoints, their restrictions on these women and say, well, you can't make a free choice. We're fighting for women's choices. We're fighting for women's rights, but we want to impose what we think is good for you on to you. Same thing with this condom thing. It's the stupidest idea ever, and it is a prime example of how the government is trying to get into our personal lives. I think it's totally, totally wrong. Next thing, tragic situation. Last week, there was a massacre in Colorado at a movie theater, and 12 people were killed. I believe the youngest one was 6 years old. And there was actually a 3-month-old baby, which, why the baby was in the movie theater, but that's another issue, was injured, but the baby was quickly taken care of and released to her parents, which is a great thing. What's not great is 12 people lost their lives, 59, I believe, people were injured. There was a total of about 70 people who were shot. This is what they're saying, the biggest mass shooting in American history. And of course, it has rightfully brought up a lot of outrage, a lot of sadness. There's been a number of these killings in the past, and it's going to make people start injecting their opinions in the situation. It gets politicized and whatnot. So on the one hand, you have people calling for gun control. There's people who like to see all guns removed from civilian use. That ain't gonna happen. The Second Amendment guarantees our right to bear arms. People will fight, I think literally. That ain't gonna happen. People are going to be able to bear arms here in America as part of the fabric of our country. You could like it or hate it, that ain't going away. Then a little bit less extreme than no guns are people who want to restrict people's rights to have a lot of guns. And I think that there's something to be said for that. I think that there's no good reason why somebody should be able to own, for example, an assault rifle, which this shooter had. There's no good reason for a civilian to be able to stockpile within a few weeks or a couple of weeks 6,000 rounds of ammunition, which this shooter had. He bought 2 guns and he had a second rifle. He had a total of 4 guns. I think that we can use some common sense and inject it into the situation and restrict people from doing extreme things that can threaten public safety. The problem is that the NRA is probably the most powerful constituency in the country. And when they raise up their head, politicians listen because they're afraid of the clout they carry. They're afraid of the votes that they can get together and affect elections. And so common sense things like banning assault rifles don't happen. Common sense things like restricting the amount of ammunition you can buy within a certain period of time don't happen. Things like extended clips where people can have umpteen. I think this guy had a magazine that could load 100 bullets. There's no good reason why a civilian needs to have that. But politicians are afraid of the NRA, and we need politicians who have guts, who are willing to stand up for things that make sense for the citizens of America. So while I think there are some common sense things that could be done around the issue of gun control, I think that alone doesn't solve the problem. Eyes are killing me. I think that one of the things we need to look at is one of the common denominators of all of these mass shootings. For one, I think it's clear that each one of these people, from Columbine to the shooting in Arizona that shot Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, the shooting in Virginia Tech that killed a whole bunch of college kids, and this one, all these people clearly wanted to be famous. And the media complied and made them famous. If they have a manifesto and this and that, that gets read and discussed, it gets all over the internet, and their quest for fame gets satisfied. I think that we literally should have a law that prohibits the release, or at least a law might be difficult because of freedom of the press and freedom of speech. But I think there should be an agreement that people in the media will not discuss the names of these shooters or even where they're from. They should be kept in the dark because that's where they're at. They're dark, evil people. And I refuse to say his name in anything I write or on the show. The same way that the media doesn't discuss the name of a suspected victim of rape or molestation. I think the same should be true when it comes with keeping the names of these shooters off the airwaves and out of print. The next thing is that in many of these cases there's an element of mental illness, and it can be a range of things, but all of these people seem to have been marginalized either by the people they know or by themselves. They separate themselves from people, and it's usually a change. It's not that they've always been that way. There is a change where sometime closer to the time of the shooting, they stopped talking to people. They stopped going out like they used to. They started acting kind of funny. They said that this guy that was the shooter in the Colorado shooting was at a gun range, and he was acting really suspiciously. And the problem is that we may see people like this and we don't say anything. And there's that campaign now. It's more directed toward terrorism, but I think it certainly can apply here, where it says if you see something, say something. I think that's so important that we need to start looking out for each other. And when people are isolating themselves, when they're feeling more depressed, if they say something that's kind of like suspicious or out of whack, we need to speak up. And if we're not somebody that can affect the situation for them, then we need to tell somebody who might be able to do something to help these people out. It's a very, very important thing. So I say we should be our brother's keeper. And if we can do that, if we can keep their names off the airwaves and out of print, if we can have some common sense gun control reform, I think it will go a long way towards helping to at least curb the problem. We're not going to eliminate these kind of people that are willing to do extraordinarily desperate and dangerous things. A lot of times they actually want to get killed. That probably wasn't the case with this guy in Colorado, since he had on, you know, full body armor. And then the other thing is that he went to all the trouble of making this elaborate plan and booby trapping his house, and then he goes into court for his first hearing, and now all of a sudden he's looking crazy, you know, dozing off and looking like a real loony bird. So I think that if they go for the defense of insanity, I think he still ought to be executed. I'm a big advocate of the death penalty, and I think he's a perfect candidate for it. Now, people might think that, excuse me, that the death penalty doesn't work and, you know, it's unfair and whatnot. I think those are things that can be fixed. I can get into that in another show, but the death penalty can be fixed, and I think if there are some fixes done to it, it can be a lot more effective at curbing murder. Probably not these kinds of murders, these feigned murders, but it can do a lot as far as curbing, I think, more, for lack of a better term, more conventional murders. So that's that. On to the next thing. I want to get into some politics. You know I had to do it. I've been talking a lot lately about, in my personal life, and I've talked on the show, I've done some writing about it, about the Republicans and how they have been so, in my mind, just horrible when it comes to obstructing the president, where their whole objective as a party is to see to it that President Obama doesn't get reelected. I think it's rotten to the core. They are not serving the American people. When Obamacare was being talked about and developed, the Republicans were doing everything they possibly could to see to it that it wasn't passed into law. They got defeated. It was passed into law. Then they say, oh, we want to repeal it now. At first they were saying repeal and replace. But in time, they dropped the replace part. They just want to repeal it. And when they're pressed on, well, what would you replace it with? What's your alternative? They have no real alternatives. The reason they have no real alternatives to Obamacare is because they don't give a damn about whether you live or die because you can't afford health care. They don't give a damn about whether you and your family go broke because you got sick and your lousy health care wouldn't cover it, or you couldn't afford health care, and so you got some lousy coverage, lousy care in the hospital. So there's a lot of nonsense that the Republicans have been responsible for. However, the Republicans ain't the only ones. They are not the only ones who've been guilty of a lot of nonsense. The Democrats have been guilty of plenty themselves. For one, they've been talking about taxes, and they have been on this kick of saying that the rich should pay their fair share. which may sound good to people who aren't rich. Clearly, it doesn't sound good to people who are. The problem with that is that the rich are paying a bigger, the rich income tax rate is much higher.
Scene one, Apple, take two.
Let me rewind that. The income tax rate for rich people is much higher than it is for middle class and working class people. They get a lot of loopholes and deductions that a lot of other people don't get, and so they may wind up paying a smaller percentage. But the income tax rate is currently higher for rich people than it is for people who aren't rich. And so to say that they should pay their fair share, and what that means is the president wants to raise the interest rate for the percentage rate for rich folks, so that they should pay an even higher percentage of their income. The president deciding that rich people should give up more of the money they work for and saying that's paying their fair share. I think that's nonsense. I think it's idiotic to penalize people for being successful, for working hard, and making them pay even more money for that. I think it does, like the Republicans say, hurt innovation. It hurts business to tell them that when you're successful and you're working hard, we're going to snatch away even more of your money. The government has to find better ways to cover government expense. There is gazillions of dollars of waste, and that's where they need to go and cut out the nonsense instead of punishing people for being successful. And the other thing is that they're making it seem as though this is going to solve or even be a big part of solving the deficit problem that we have in this country. They don't tell you is that if this tax were passed on rich people, that it would only fix a tiny sliver of the deficit problem. I've seen estimates that it would only account for maybe 10% of the deficit. So 90% of this deficit would still be in effect if the Democrats got their way and passed this higher tax on rich folks. I'm looking to make sure I don't go over time here. So I think that they're not telling the American people the whole truth when it comes to this tax issue. Taxing the rich more is not going to be a solution. I think it's a ridiculous idea. I think they shouldn't get extra breaks and extra considerations. I think they shouldn't get extra write-offs and loopholes and all this stuff that everybody doesn't get. That part is unfair, but it's not going to solve the deficit problem. It's just a matter of being fair. So to say they should pay their own fair share, I think they already are, and they need to get off the backs of the rich people. Additionally, President Obama has had a number of things that he has promised that he has not followed through on, or he has broken his promise. I did a little research on PolitiFact, which is a fact-checking organization. They've won the Pulitzer Prize. They're one of the main fact-checking websites on the internet. And real quick, because I am getting close to the end of my time, I want to go over a couple of things. President Obama said that he would close Guantanamo Bay in his first year of office. 3.5 years later, Guantanamo Bay is still open. That is something that can be done by a presidential directive, by presidential order. He could have ordered it done, and it would be done. He said he would do it. He didn't do it. I got a problem with that. He said his administration would be the most transparent administration in history. It is not. Even right now, there's the thing going on where Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress for not turning over some papers for this Fast and Furious gun thing with the Mexican cartels and all this. Eric Holder doesn't want to turn over some papers. So that is stonewalling. It is not transparent. President Obama said that there would be cameras on any congressional hearings regarding any laws that they're trying to pass, and it would be on C-SPAN. That has not happened. The president has said that he would have a watchdog agency that would look over issues of congressional ethics violations. That hasn't happened. He said that he would end income tax for seniors who made under $50,000. That hasn't happened. He says that he would forbid companies in bankruptcy from paying their executives bonuses. That hasn't happened. There's been a whole lot of stuff that if you go on politifact.com or even factcheck.com, you will see there's a bunch of things that President Obama promised he hasn't come through on. My point is this: even though I'm supporting the president for this election, mostly based on his passing of the healthcare thing and the Republicans lying about it, but the Democrats are responsible for a lot of nonsense. We need to hold our politicians responsible for what they do and remind them who they work for. We elect them into office and then we throw in the towel and let them do whatever the hell they want, and we suffer for it. The only way that's going to change is if we speak up and we take back the power that we are supposed to have here in this country. So that's it. The end of the show. And you know what we do at the end of every show? We got to get our drinky drink on. And as always, if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, whatever, get at me. Hit me on the email. Boom! KLHOUD1 at Comcast.net. I'd love to hear from you folks. You don't have to agree with me. If you have a commentary you want to send it in, I would love to read it on the air. I've yet to get one, but I'm hoping one of these days. So yeah, our drinky drink, man, it's gonna be Patron. Word up. Pour a little bit of that in here. It's daytime, so I'm gonna do just a half a shot. But you know I gotta do some kind of liquor to keep the tradition alive. So you know what it is, man. I live to be 100 years. May you live to be 100 years in a day. Peace. Yeah, that is some good liquor. Word up, man. Talk to you next week.